The wind howled through the broken towers of Winterfell like a restless beast. Snow clung to the old stones as if afraid to let go. The war was over. The Night King was gone. But peace hadn't truly come. Not for the North, not for Sansa. She sat alone in the great hall, her fingers brushing against the carved wood of the high seat, the one her father used to sit on. She closed her eyes for just a moment and could almost hear his voice. Calm, just, firm. But this time, something was different. The voice didn't feel like a memory, it felt real. I failed them, it whispered. Sansa's eyes flew open. The room was empty, but the air had shifted. The fire in the hearth flickered, though no wind touched it. She stood up quickly, heart thudding, her breath visible in the sudden chill. Sansa! Bran wheeled into the hall, his face blank as usual, but his eyes sharper than ever. I heard him, she said without turning. Father. Bran didn't even blink. He's been here. I've seen it. What do you mean? She snapped, stepping toward him. Ghosts are real, Bran said quietly. Some have no reason to leave. That night, Jon Snow arrived at Winterfell. His face was tired. The war in the south had left him colder than the north ever could. He hadn't even taken off his cloak when Sansa pulled him into a room and shut the door behind them. He's here, she said. Our father. Jon stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But Bran's silence at the table later that night said more than words could. Later still, Arya stood at the godswood, her fingers brushing the old heart tree. You never stopped watching, did you? She whispered. Even after death. And the branches moved, just once, no wind, just a slow, eerie shift. Then a low groan, deep and echoing, not from the tree, but from under the ground. That was the beginning. By the third night, the servants started hearing footsteps in empty halls. Whispers came from cold chambers no one dared enter. Ravens screamed at midnight, banging into windows as if trying to get in or get out. One old woman claimed she saw Lord Eddard's ghost walking through the crypts, headless, blood trailing behind him like a shadow. She was dismissed as mad, until the next morning when she was found dead in her bed, her face frozen in terror, mouth wide open, and a single feather lying beside her heart. Sansa held a council with the lords of the north, but their eyes kept drifting to the shadows, to the cold corners of the hall. One man, Lord Dustin, spoke ill of Ned's legacy, claiming he'd failed the North by bending the knee too easily. That night, his horses went mad. His dogs turned on him, and by morning he was found at the edge of the godswood, naked, his body frozen solid, his lips twisted in a scream. No wounds, no blood, just fear. Father is judging them, Arya whispered to Jon, her eyes hollow. He was never cruel, Jon said. This isn't him. Bran looked between them. It is, but it's what's left of him. Ghosts don't return whole. One evening, Sansa stood before the crypts. She descended alone, her torch barely lighting the way. Her hand trembled as she approached her father's tomb. I need to know, she whispered. Why now? The air shifted. The torch nearly went out, and behind her a soft voice said, because the North forgot what honor truly meant. She turned, but no one was there, just darkness. The same chill gripped her chest. Her eyes filled with tears. Then teach us again, she whispered, but don't become the monster they think you are. Up above, Jon stood on the battlements, watching the snow fall. Ghost lay by his feet, whining. And then a shadow walked across the courtyard. No torch, no sound, just a long, dragging cloak and the shape of a sword, one Jon knew all too well. Father, he breathed. But the ghost didn't look at him. It looked past him, toward the south, toward something darker than death, and then it vanished. The snowstorm hit Winterfell hard the next day. Thick, blinding flurries blanketed the courtyards, and wind clawed at the walls like something trying to get in or out. It wasn't just the weather. Everyone could feel it. Something old and cold had awakened, and it wasn't leaving. Jon stayed close to the godswood. He didn't speak much. Even Ghost, usually alert and fierce, wouldn't go near the crypts now. He only growled low in his throat when they passed. Bran, as usual, didn't explain anything. He just sat in silence, watching the flames, watching people. It was like he was waiting for the next move in a game only he could see. Sansa kept trying to hold things together. The North was watching her, but her voice had started to tremble in meetings, and her eyes kept flicking toward empty corners. The Northern lords were growing nervous. Rumors spread. Some whispered Ned had returned to punish the South, some said he'd come to judge his children, and some believed he was after revenge for his own betrayal. "He died with honor, Lord," Manderley said one night during a tense supper. "But honor doesn't bring peace to the dead, not if they were wronged." Arya leaned across the table, eyes sharp as Valyrian steel. He was wronged by the very people who called him brother, and they still sit in castles, untouched. It wasn't just talk anymore. That same night, a raven flew into the council chamber, blood on its wings, and dropped a ring onto the floor. An old gold ring once worn by a southern lord who'd betrayed Ned in King's Landing. No one knew how it had gotten there. The message was clear. Down in the crypts, Jon finally lit a torch and stepped inside alone. The silence was thick, like it pressed against his chest. He walked past the statues, Lyanna, Rickon, his grandfather. When he reached Ned's tomb, the air grew cold again, colder than anything he'd felt beyond the wall. He knelt, hands resting on the stone. "If this is you," he whispered, "then say something. Help us understand." But there was no voice. This time, just a shadow behind him, long, stretched, watching. Jon spun around, sword half drawn. Nothing, but his heart pounded like war drums. On the wall behind the tomb, carved in the frost, was a single word: liars. Bran told them the truth that evening. Our father's soul didn't pass on. Not all of it, he said. There's a rift between life and death. When the magic of the North was broken by the war with the dead, it cracked something older, something deeper. He was peaceful, Sansa said, clenching her fists. He deserved peace. Bran looked at her with cold clarity. But peace doesn't come when justice is left undone. Arya leaned against the wall, face unreadable. So what's he doing now? Killing? Bran didn't answer. He just said, "There are more names on his list than yours ever had." The next to die was a southern envoy sent from King's Landing. He came with gold, apologies, and promises of peace. He left in a pine box, his face frozen with his eyes wide open and his tongue turned black. The Maesters claimed it was frostbite, but there hadn't been frost inside his chamber when he was found, only a raven feather resting on his chest. The message couldn't be clearer. Ned Stark's ghost wasn't just haunting Winterfell, he was judging Westeros. Jon met Arya by the stables that night, their breaths misting in the air. "He's not killing the innocent," Jon said. "Only those who betrayed him." Arya gave a small, hard smile. "That list is long, Jon, and some of them are people we still need." Jon shook his head. "This isn't justice, this is revenge, and if we don't stop it, the North won't be a kingdom. It'll be a grave," she nodded once. "Then we stop it, but not by fighting him." "Then how?" Arya looked up at the sky, snow landing on her lashes. "We talk to him." Jon frowned. "How do you talk to a ghost?" Her voice was quiet. "The same way you talk to the dead. You go where they are." That night, they descended into the crypts again, this time together. Bran waited by the heart tree, eyes rolling back, mind somewhere else. Sansa stayed behind, guarding the gates. Arya and Jon lit their torches and moved past the tombs. This time, they didn't speak. They didn't need to. When they reached Ned's statue, the torches flickered violently and went out. The only light came from the faint glowing blue mist rising from the cracks in the stones, and then a figure stepped out of the shadows, half shadow, half ice, a face they knew, lined with sorrow and rage, and Ned Stark finally spoke. "You have their blood, but do you have their courage?" Jon stared at the figure before him, barely breathing. The voice was unmistakable, deep, solemn, weighed down by honor and heartbreak. But the body? It shimmered in pieces, as if stuck between worlds. The face was whole, but shadows swirled around the shoulders where a head had once been severed. And yet there was no pain in his expression, just judgment, cold and patient. Arya stepped forward first. She didn't flinch. Her voice was steady. "Is it really you?" she asked. Ned's ghost didn't blink, didn't breathe. "I remember. Your first blade. You named it Needle. You wanted to protect, not kill." Arya's throat tightened. "I still do." "You all do," Ned said, his gaze turning to Jon. "But protecting means knowing when to stand and when to strike. I stood in silence too long, and the realm paid in blood." Jon's voice cracked as he stepped forward. "You did what you thought was right. Always." Ned's figure darkened slightly, the blue glow flaring for a moment. "Right doesn't matter when truth is hidden. I lied, Jon. I lied to protect you. And now that lie has grown roots across kingdoms. It's corrupted everything." The air thickened, with sorrow and something else. Anger. Arya whispered, "You're not just here to punish traitors. You're here because of Jon." Ned nodded slowly. "The Dragon Queen was only the beginning, the truth of who Jon is. It'll burn Westeros down unless it's faced. The realm has built its peace on a grave of silence. And silence is no longer enough." Jon stepped back, shaking his head. "You want me to take the throne?" But Ned's ghost flared again. "I want you to claim your truth before someone else claims it for you." When they returned to the surface, Bran was waiting by the heart tree. His eyes met Jon's, and Jon knew immediately. He'd seen it all. "We don't have time," Bran said quietly. "The South is already stirring. Cersei's death didn't kill her legacy. The Lords are restless. The whispers of your name are spreading faster than wildfire." Sansa met them at the gate. Her face was pale, her hands shaking. There was another death, in Riverrun. A fray. She swallowed hard. Skinned alive. The skin was pinned to a wall with a sword through it, father's old sword. Ice. Jon felt a chill crawl down his back, but ice was melted down. It doesn't exist anymore. Arya shook her head. It exists in him now. Across Westeros, the ghost of Ned Stark moved like a cold wind. He wasn't seen often, but his work was unmistakable. A merchant in King's Landing, once paid to lie at Ned's trial, was found drowned in his own wine. A former maester who helped forge the false charges was buried alive in his own books. And each time, the only sign of who had done it was the same. A single raven feather, stained with frost. The realm was beginning to panic. Some called it divine justice. Some called it northern sorcery. But no one wanted to be on the wrong side of history now, not if it meant facing Ned Stark's ghost. Jon knew he couldn't run anymore. Not from his past, not from his name. He'd spent his life thinking he was the bastard son of a nobleman. But now he knew the truth. Aegon Targaryen, the last legitimate male heir to the Iron Throne, but he didn't want it. "I'd rather burn it down than rule it," he told Arya. "And that's why you should rule," she said, voice hard. "Because you don't want it. The ones who do are the ones who'll end up killing everything to get it." Bran finally spoke. "We must go south. The haunting won't stop until the last lie is dead." Sansa looked between them. "So we march?" "No," Arya said. "We infiltrate." The plan was madness. The four remaining Starks, reunited again, riding together into the very city where their father had been betrayed and executed. But this time, they weren't children, they weren't unarmed, and they weren't alone. Ned Stark was riding with them, not seen, not spoken of, but there, in every cold breeze, in every frightened crow, in every flicker of fire that didn't burn hot enough. And one night, just as they passed the ruins of Harrenhal, Jon woke up gasping from a nightmare. In it, he saw a throne made of bones, with ravens circling it like a storm. And on that throne, his father's ghost sat, but his face was not his own, it was Jon's. The journey south was long, brutal, and soaked in unease. The closer they got to King's Landing, the colder the nights became, unnaturally cold. Even Arya, who barely reacted to pain or weather, shivered beneath her cloak. It made no sense. Spring had begun, the snow should have melted, but it felt like winter was following them, whispering behind every tree, clutching at their heels like a warning they couldn't outrun. Jon didn't sleep much. When he did, the dreams were worse. Always. The same, the Iron Throne, but it wasn't made of swords anymore. It was made of bones, spines twisted together, still bleeding. Ravens perched on the arms like kings, and in the distance he could always hear one voice repeating over and over, "Claim your truth, or bury it." By the time they reached the outskirts of King's Landing, it wasn't the golden towers or blackened ruins that welcomed them. It was silence, a thick, eerie silence, like the city was holding its breath. The streets were quieter than they should have been. Merchants packed up early. Windows stayed shuttered. It wasn't fear of war anymore. It was something older, colder. Arya noticed it first. "They're afraid of something inside the walls," she said, crouching beside a broken cart. "Not us, not even rumors of Jon." Sansa's mouth tightened. "They know he's here." "No," Arya said, standing slowly. "They know he is." That night, as the Starks gathered in the old chambers of an abandoned estate near the Red Keep, a sudden gust of wind burst through the windows. The fire dimmed, and every candle went out in unison. The silence was deafening. And then, in the middle of the room, the ghost appeared again. Ned Stark stood there, full-bodied now, head on his shoulders, face carved from sorrow and frost. But his eyes, they weren't entirely human anymore. They flickered like dying stars. Still, they found each one of them. "A debt is owed," he said softly. "The truth must stand on the bones of lies." Jon rose to his feet, voice low, but firm. "Then say it. Tell them I am your sister's son, that I am not a bastard." But Ned shook his head. "That truth is yours to speak, not mine, but the liars who buried it. They must face judgment." Bran's voice cut through the stillness. "Who is left, father?" Ned turned, and the fire behind him roared to life. Flames leapt, casting shadows of faces in the room. Faces Jon and Arya knew too well. Varys, Pycelle, Littlefinger, Cersei, even Robert Baratheon. "Dead or alive," Ned said, "their lies echo in this city. And until the echoes stop, peace is nothing but silence waiting to scream." The next morning, chaos hit King's Landing. The bells rang early, but not for war, for death. Pycelle's old bones were found dismembered in the maester's crypt beneath the Grand Sept. His head was placed on a book, The Lies of Lords, its pages burned black. Across his forehead, someone had carved one word into the flesh: perjurer. By nightfall, 2 more bodies appeared. One was a merchant who had paid witnesses during Ned's trial. The other, a guard who once led the escort that dragged him through the throne room in chains. Both were found frozen solid, eyes wide, lips blue, and on each chest the same calling card, a black feather resting in blood. The people began whispering. The ghost of Eddard Stark had come back to finish what he started. The High Council tried to dismiss the murders as northern assassins. Some claimed Jon had returned to seek vengeance. Others said Arya was behind it all. After all, she'd vanished for years and come back with skills no lady should have. But no one could explain the cold that followed the killings. The frost that appeared on stone, untouched by season. The ravens that watched from the rooftops in complete silence, unmoving. Not one blinked. That kind of fear spread faster than wildfire, and for the first time since the Red Keep had been rebuilt, the Queen's chamber remained lit all night. Not out of celebration, but fear, because even the Iron Throne seemed colder. Now Jon stood before the sept where his father had once been betrayed. It was mostly ruins now, the floor broken, the walls blackened by fire and war, but in the center still stood a lone column of stone. Jon placed his hand on it. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said aloud. "Not the crown, not the bloodline. I just wanted peace." "Behind him," Arya said quietly, "and peace means nothing without truth." He looked back at her. "What if the truth burns the realm down?" Arya stepped closer. "Then let it burn. Better an honest fire than a cold lie." And somewhere above them a raven cried out, not a normal cry, a word, spoken like wind through ice. "Confess." Yes. The following day, King's Landing awoke to horns echoing through the city, not for battle, not for victory, but for judgment. The common folk flooded the square outside the Red Keep, whispering, clinging to rumors like lifelines. "The bastard of Winterfell's here. He's a Targaryen, they say. The dead walk beside him." Inside the throne room, Sansa and Arya stood tall behind Jon as he stepped forward. No armor, no crown, just the truth riding heavy in his chest like a second heart. Bran waited near the entrance, eyes distant, face unreadable. His presence alone made the lords nervous. Too many had seen too much in his silence. The hand of the Queen, Sir Garan Velmont, addressed the court with a polished sneer. "You come to the heart of the realm to declare what exactly? That you are more than what you were born as?" Jon met his gaze. "I came to end the silence that built this throne. I came to name the lie." There was a pause, then whispers. Lords shifting in their seats, the flicker of real fear. Sansa stepped forward. "You all watched our father die for a secret he never told, and now his ghost walks because that secret still lives." Arya's voice was sharper. "Every corpse he leaves behind is one more person who helped bury the truth, and you're all running out of lies." Then Jon turned slowly to face the Iron Throne, and he spoke not to the lords, but to the hall itself, to the ghosts in the stone, to the weight of a kingdom built on blood and silence. "My name is Jon Snow, but I was never a Snow. My real name is Aegon Targaryen, born of Rhaegar and Lyanna. My father died protecting that truth. My mother died because she loved a prince, and I," his voice cracked, "have run from it long enough." The room went dead still. You could hear hearts breaking, or maybe just stopping, and then Bran's voice rang out, soft, eerie, final, confirmed by the old ravens, by the diaries of a dead maester. "And by me," someone shouted. "You expect us to believe you?" Arya didn't flinch. "You believe the men who lied. Why not the boy who sees everything?" Outside the Red Keep, a storm had started to brew, sky turning grey with unnatural speed. Crows filled the air, thousands of them, circling like a black cloud. And within the winds a voice began to chant, "Confess! Confess! Confess!" Inside, a dozen nobles dropped to their knees, whispering prayers, curses, and names. One old lord stood, trembling. "We knew Ned Stark's claims weren't treason. We said nothing because silence paid more than honor ever could." He fell, dead on the spot. No sword, no poison, just silence and cold. Another noblewoman wept, screaming that she had watched Lyanna bleed in a tower, and told no one. Her breath left her body in a visible puff of frost before she collapsed. By the time the third one tried to flee the room, the doors had shut on their own, locked, frozen. The Iron Throne room became a tomb of truth. One by one, confessions spilled out. Some begged forgiveness, some screamed it in madness. But the more that spoke, the louder the winds grew, and the colder the stone beneath their feet became. And then he appeared. Not through doors, not from shadows, just was. Ned Stark, ghostly and regal, stepped from thin air, head high, cloak trailing. Mist behind him, eyes glowing like frozen moons. He didn't speak. He didn't have to. He only pointed at the throne, and every man and woman in the chamber understood. This was not about Jon taking the throne. It was about Jon destroying it. Jon stood still, feeling his father's eyes. On him, his lips parted. This throne cost you your life. It cost thousands more. It wasn't built for peace. It was built for power, and power buried the truth. The throne, as if hearing him, groaned. A long metal creak. One sword twisted, another snapped, and then the room trembled. The floor cracked beneath the dais. The throne shuddered. The iron started to split, molten heat rising from the cracks, hissing against the sudden cold. Arya pulled Sansa back. Bran didn't move. Ned's ghost stepped onto the dais, and with one final haunting stare at Jon, he vanished, his entire form shattering into snowflakes that didn't melt. The Iron Throne cracked down the middle, and then collapsed. The dust settled slowly. Silence held the throne room hostage, thicker than before. Where once the Iron Throne had towered, jagged and cruel, now only twisted blades and a broken base remained, molten in the middle, steaming like a wound that refused to heal. Jon didn't move. No one did, until Arya stepped forward and kicked a scorched sword fragment that had once pierced thousands. It clattered across the stone floor like it had lost all its meaning. Sansa, eyes still wide, whispered, "It's over." But Bran spoke behind her. "No, now it begins." Word spread faster than wildfire. By the time the sun rose, ravens had already flown to the corners of Westeros, carrying the same message: the throne is no more. Truth shattered it. Some laughed, some cried, some cursed the Starks, but many, many more simply paused. Because even if they didn't believe in ghosts, they believed in fear. And fear had walked through King's Landing wearing the face of the North. At Winterfell, the cold lifted for the first time in weeks. The snow melted unnaturally fast. Crops started peeking through. The old Maester said it felt like a curse had been lifted, and no one dared question which curse. Back in the capital, the lords and ladies scrambled like ants in a crushed hive. With the throne gone, power had no centre. Factions formed instantly, some pushing Jon to declare himself king, some begging Sansa to lead, others whispering of old bloodlines and new crowns. But Jon wanted none of it. He stood at the ruins of the Sept that evening, hands gripping the stone railing, watching the city light its torches. Arya approached quietly. "They're going to force a crown on your head, whether you want it or not." He didn't look at her. "Then I'll throw it into the fire. They'll say you're abandoning them." Jon exhaled. "Good. Let them build something without ghosts haunting every stone." Arya looked up at him. "And what will you do?" "I'm going north," he said, "farther than before, beyond the wall, where names don't matter." Arya nodded. "Then I'll come with you." "No," he said softly. "You're needed here." She smirked. "You sound like him." Jon finally turned to her. "We all do now." In the days that followed, the Great Council met. For the first time in decades, it was not held under the weight of a throne, but around a circle. Stone benches, fire at the center, no seat higher than another. Sansa stood among them. She didn't speak of war or bloodlines. She spoke of justice, of truth, of her father, who had died for a lie and returned only to bury it. We do not need kings or queens built from fire and fear, she said. We need memory, we need humility, we need to remember that power belongs to the people, not to a chair. The council voted, and for the first time in history, Westeros chose not a monarch, but a council of representatives, one from each region, rotating leadership with no throne at all. Bran the Broken was named the first speaker of the realm. Not a king, a steward of peace. The night Jon left, the sky was clear. Arya stood beside Ghost at the gates of the city, watching her brother ride into the mist with only his sword and his silence. She didn't cry. She knew they'd meet again, on another path, under another sky. Sansa watched from the Red Keep, her crown already offered to the north, where she would return as Wardeness, not Queen. The north would stay free, not separate, from the realm, but not ruled by it either. Bran watched it all without emotion, though somewhere deep inside he wondered if even he had been part of a plan older than any of them. A plan set in motion by a man who refused to die quietly, and deep beneath Winterfell, in the crypts where it all began, the wind whispered, no longer howling, just whispering, soft, cold, at peace. The statue of Eddard Stark stood unchanged. But, for one small thing, the stone sword once held across his lap was gone. Only snow rested there now, and a black feather. The end.